So a few months back, I published my most popular video, Average Indo-European Ancestry in Modern Groups, and I've been aware for some time now that there are some inaccuracies in that video. For one, this was before I really knew anything about admixture modeling, so most of the information was based off of a Global 25 admixture model made by a blogger named Tooltide, and it's a pretty good model. However, the issue lies in the source population for Baltic hunter-gatherers. To put it simply, Global 25 has a hard time distinguishing Proto-Indo-European or Western Steppe Herder ancestry with some Eastern European hunter-gatherer groups, such as the Baltic hunter-gatherers, and therefore we can't really get an accurate estimate for some of these European groups that have an excess of this hunter-gatherer ancestry, such as Baltic or Russian people, for instance. So in the future, when I redo this video, my solution is just going to be to use qpAdm. I made the claim that the Kalash of Pakistan and the Nuristanis of Afghanistan had similar levels of Indo-European steppe ancestry to Scandinavians and British people, around 50% to be exact. And this claim was essentially based off of an outdated estimate from a 2016 study. So in this video, I'm just going to reassess the ancestry of the Kalash and Nuristani, as well as address some of the bizarre claims and rumors about these people that I've seen floating around online for the past few years. Firstly, who are the Kalash? The Kalash are an ethnic group of around 4,000 people that reside in the Kalasha valleys of the Chitral district in Pakistan. They speak the Indo-Aryan Dardic language of Kalasha, which has remarkable continuity with Sanskrit. The Kalash in the western valleys of the Chitral district still practice an Indo-European religion that bears many similarities to the ancient Vedic religion. Their religious practices have left many scratching their heads as to whether it represents the most ancient form of Vedic religion or some kind of unique development. From what I can tell, most Kalash deities can be identified as being equivalent or at least very similar to the Vedic deities. They also have some characteristics of the native religions of the Hindu Kush, Pamiri, and Himalaya regions, such as the use of flat drums and shamanism. As referenced in a Kalash hymnal, they also believe in a supreme creator deity, which they sometimes refer to as Allah, an obvious sign of Islamic influence. Them calling this supreme deity Allah isn't really surprising to me, considering that the only outsiders they interact with on a regular basis are Muslims. So I believe this just happens to be an example of a cultural and linguistic impact Islam had on their religion. I don't really think there's any reason to believe that they are religious syncretists or actually believe in the Abrahamic God. Now, they have a number of unique rites and festivals, the most important being Chalmos. The participants undergo a purification ritual, and then 2 weeks of dancing, praying to the visitor god Balumine, and drinking mulberry wine commence. The Kalash have been heavily influenced over the years by a neighboring tribe in Afghanistan called the Nuristanis. Now, the Nuristani languages are Indo-Iranian, but they aren't Dardic, nor are they even Indo-Aryan or Iranic. Rather, they're a distinct branch of the Indo-Iranian subgroup itself. Most of the similarities lie in the religious practices of the two groups. The Nuristani deities can be identified as having originated in the Vedas, and like the Kalash, they believe in a creator deity that rules heaven and the underworld as well, called Imra, or Mara. The latter appellation literally translates to death. It's for this reason that I believe that Imro has some sort of connection to Yama, the Rigvedic god of death and the underworld. Now, these two groups have gained a lot of attention in the 20th and 21st centuries for having a white or Nordic appearance, and you will often see people online share images of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Kalash and Nuristanis. It's true that they can definitely have traits such as light skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, but it's not the average person. I'd also like to point out that some of the images that a lot of people share are actually edited to make them look whiter than they actually are. Look at the original and edited version of this image, for example. However, the fact that some of these people have blonde hair and blue eyes has inspired, these weird theories that they're actually the descendants of Alexander the Great's army. This is something that has not only been applied to the Kalash and Nuristanis, but also to other various groups such as the inhabitants of Malana village in Himachal Pradesh, India. While it's true that the Macedonian invasion of India and the subsequent Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms left a large cultural and artistic impact on Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwestern India, I doubt they had any profound genetic impact on the Kalash or any other group. Rather, I think a more reasonable explanation would be that the Kalash simply have a significant amount of European DNA from the late Bronze Age, as there is evidence that a group of Indo-European speaking people from the Andronovo culture invaded the region we today know as Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. and these people did probably have higher frequencies of blonde hair and blue eyes. Unfortunately, we don't have any samples of the Nuristanis, but to find out how much of this ancestry the Kalash actually have, I'm going to trace their genetic origins using Global 25 model. So the first ancient population we need to talk about when understanding the origins of the Kalash is the Indus Valley civilization. For those who don't know, the Indus Valley civilization was an advanced Bronze Age agricultural civilization located in contemporary Pakistan and northwestern India prior to European contact. So for the Indus Valley civilization source, I'm using Shahar-e-Sokhta Bronze Age 2. This is an average of samples found in eastern Iran. This population lived on what was the periphery of the Indus Valley civilization and shows a substantial South Asian shift. If we look at the breakdowns, they're around 60% Iran Neolithic and 35% ancient ancestral South Indian, with the remainder of it being West Siberian hunter-gatherer. So what this means is that their origins can be traced to some kind of admixture event between the pre-Indo-European Iranians and Central Asians and the native South Asian hunter-gatherers. Mind you, for the AASI source, I'm using a modern group, the Yonge, as a proxy because we don't have any ancient AASI samples. And that's the reason why the distance is so high on this model. You can get better fits with similar results if you use a simulated AASI source, but I usually refrain from using simulations on this channel just so nobody can accuse me of, being imprecise or not objective because the coordinates are just theoretical. The second major ancient population source for the Kalash is going to be people from the Middle Late Bronze Age Andronovo culture. Global 25 doesn't really have a definitive Andronovo population. It does have sources from around that place and time period with an Andronovo profile, but for the sake of simplicity and just to be safe, I'm just going to use a Santashta culture population average as the Proto-Indo-Iranian proxy, because they were directly ancestral to the Andronovo culture after all, and it works well enough. If we take a look at the ancestry of the Santashta culture, we can see that they're mainly steppe herder and EEF derived, with a minimal amount of native West Siberian admixture. Keep in mind that I'm using an early corded ware sample from Czechia that has around the same amount of steppe herder ancestry that the early Yamnaya does, because in this instance it provided a better fit and also is almost undoubtedly the actual vector of the Western Steppe Herder ancestry in the Santashta to begin with. The Yamnaya and early corded ware could be described as having most of their ancestry derived locally from the steppes of Eastern Europe, with minimal admixture from the early European farmers. What I find interesting is that there's evidence of these two groups, the Andronovo and the Indus Valley civilization, intermixing after the former group's arrival. So within the first few hundred years of the arrival of the Indo-Aryan speaking Andronovo, they intermix with the native South Asians that were the descendants of the Indus Valley civilization. We can detect this mixed genetic profile in samples from the Iron Age, specifically the late Vedic period. This outlier from the Swat Valley in Pakistan has the highest amount of Andronovo ancestry of all Iron Age samples from this region at around 35%, with the remainder of their ancestry being mostly of Indus Valley and BMAC origin. BMAC, or the Oxus civilization, was a civilization in Central Asia, and the people that lived there were closely related to the pre-Indo-European people in the Iranian plateau. Now, there were other samples found at this same Swat Valley site at around the same time, and what's interesting is that these only have around 12% Andronovo ancestry on average, and a whopping 54% Indus Valley civilization-related ancestry, the remainder being BMAC related, with some minimal amounts of East Asian and native West Siberian ancestry. To me, this is clear evidence that there was some kind of caste divide as far back as the late Vedic period, and this isn't all that surprising, because even today we can see that Indian Brahmins have higher amounts of steppe ancestry than those of the lower castes do. Another sample from Iron Age Barakot has around 16% Andronovo ancestry and 43% Indus Valley ancestry, the rest being BMAC, WSHG, and East Asian related. As it turns out, this is the ancient sample that is closest to the modern-day Kalash. Well, obviously, because of how close they are to ancient and medieval populations in Pakistan, we know that there's probably some sort of genetic continuity. So it wouldn't be that surprising if they too derived the majority of their ancestry from the Santashta, IVC, and BMAC sources, with minimal ancestry from the native hunter-gatherers and East Asians. And when I tried modeling their ancestry, I found that to be exactly the case. Their Santashta ancestry is at around 20% on average, and when you take into consideration that the Santashta themselves are around 66% Western Steppe Herder, the conclusion is the Kalash themselves derive around 13% 10% of their ancestry from the steppe herders indirectly. So, after all the evidence I've seen, I can say with confidence that they range somewhere between 10 to 20% steppe herder on average. But how does this compare to the modern groups around them? Well, going off of more G25 models I made for South Asians, we can see that the Kalash probably don't even have the most Santashta ancestry in all of South Asia. That spot would go to the Jats and Roars. I also discovered by looking at these models that Pashtuns, which are an Iranic-speaking ethnicity in Pakistan and Afghanistan, tend to have more BMAC ancestry than Indo-Aryan groups in, India, which makes sense. This made me think that the Kalash are genetically similar to Pashtuns, and I confirmed this after looking at a PCA plot as well as checking their distances to modern groups. The Indo-Aryan speaking group that they're closest to are the Ko people, who also happen to reside in the Chitral district and are Dardic, and also have a lot of BMAC ancestry. So what is there to say about the Kalash in conclusion? Well, for one, I can say that the Kalash have likely been in that region for a long time, as they appear to have some continuity with Iron Age people that resided in what is now the Swat district, which neighbors the Chitral district. It's because of this that I don't think their Pashtun-like genetic profile necessarily has to be from a recent admixture event with the Pashtuns. It seems to me that they started mixing with Iranic people a very long time ago, and the fact that other Indo-Aryans don't have as much of this admixture is simply a matter of proximity. I mean, like I said earlier, if we look at the Ko people, they also have a lot of BMAC-derived ancestry, and that's because they're in the same general region as the Kalash, which is close to the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Based on the fact that they speak an Indo-Aryan language and practice a religion that bears similarity to the ancient Vedic religion, I think it's safe to say that the Kalash are the descendants of Aryans. However, they do not have similar amounts of steppe admixture as Northern Europeans, and the same can likely be said about the Nuristanis. So that's all I have to say for today. I hope you guys learned something new. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.